I remember that day with painful clarity, the day everything in our lives shifted. Not because of luck, but because a man's arrogance collided with a child's quiet gift. My name in this retelling is Myra Dawson, and for 2 years I had worked as an invisible presence at Ravenholt Dynamics, a shimmering giant of glass and steel buried in the heart of Silicon Valley. I cleaned the labs where geniuses paced, muttered, and argued over numbers I didn't understand. And looming at the center of that world was the pride of the company, the Helios core, a $2 billion engine meant to revolutionize global energy. But the Helios core had one unforgivable flaw. It died at 90 seconds every single time. The brightest minds had attacked the problem for weeks, rewriting code, replacing sensors, even flying in specialists from Europe. Nothing helped. Every test ended the same way: a rising whine, a trembling shudder, and the final humiliating click of shutdown. And on the 6th week, the man behind it all finally snapped. Leonard Ravenholt, the billionaire owner, sharp-eyed, silver-haired, terrifying in his immaculate suit, slashed out at his team of engineers. He mocked their degrees, their salaries, their exhaustion. But when he ran out of ways to shame them, his eyes found me standing in the corner with a cloth in my hand. "Hey, you, custodian," he barked. "What's your name?" I felt my face burn as every head turned. "Myra, sir. Myra Dawson." He stalked toward me with a smile that felt like a blade. "Tell me, Myra, what's your brilliant solution? You've heard these geniuses chirping for weeks. Don't hold back." "I just clean," I stammered. "Right," he said loudly. "And cleaning is all you're good at. But let's play pretend." He turned to his engineers. "Maybe we don't need PhDs. Maybe our salvation is standing there with a mop." They laughed, small, nervous laughs, but they laughed. He stepped even closer. "Fix this engine, Myra, and I'll give you $100 million. The room gasped. He wanted the humiliation to burn. "And if you fail," he added softly, "you're fired. And I'll make sure you never get hired by any cleaning service in this city again." I felt tears rising. I couldn't fight him. I couldn't even speak. But then, before I could crumble, a small voice sliced through the air. "My mom can't fix it," the voice said. "But I can." I turned. My daughter, Lena, stood in the doorway, 10 years old, clutching her worn teddy bear, her blue eyes steady and impossibly calm. She had been waiting for me to finish my shift. She had heard everything. Leonard burst out laughing. "This just gets better. Now the kid wants to play engineer." But Lena wasn't afraid. She walked forward, looked up at him, and said, "You don't listen to the engine. You only look at it." It stunned the room into silence. And somehow, impossibly, Leonard nodded. "Fine. Let's entertain the prodigy. The offer stands." I tried to stop her, I begged, but she squeezed my hand once and said, "Mom, Grandpa Joel taught me. Machines always tell you where they hurt." Then she stepped toward the Helios core. The massive engine towered above her like a silent, wounded giant. She placed her hands on its metal shell, closed her eyes, and listened. Truly listened. I had seen her do this before in my grandfather's workshop, where she spent hours touching old engines, learning their rhythms the way other children learn songs. "Turn it on," she said at last. The engineers obeyed. The machine roared to life. Under the deafening hum, Lena tilted her head. After only seconds, she said, "Turn it off." Leonard scoffed, but she ignored him. "There's a second vibration," she explained. "A tiny one. A whisper. It's coming from deep inside." The engineers protested, insisting their sensors would detect any harmonic anomaly, but a government observer, Dr. Fiona Hart, studied the audio feed and frowned. "She's right. There's a spike at 4.7 seconds. The room shifted. Doubt cracked into belief. Lena continued circling the engine until she stopped at the base, where several large cables fed power into the core. She touched the casing lightly. "It's her here," she said. Once again, she asked for the engine to be turned on. This time she didn't touch it. She listened from a distance. When the faint metallic ping sounded, a noise lost under the roar, she pointed directly at the culprit. "That's a crack," she said. "A tiny one inside the metal. It gets bigger when the engine gets hot. That's why it dies. A crack in the most precisely engineered machine on Earth." Leonard demanded proof. The engineers disassembled the section she indicated. At first, they found nothing, but Lena insisted they magnify the base. Under thermal filters, the impossible appeared. A microscopic fissure glowing faintly red from stored heat. She had been right. For a moment, no one breathed. When Leonard finally spoke, his voice trembled. "How do we fix it?" Lena thought for several seconds. Then she said, "You need a sleeve. Something soft, like copper. Grandpa Joel said soft metal can catch a shiver before it becomes a shake. The engineers stared at her as though she had spoken an ancient secret. Under her direction, they machined a thin copper bushing and a new bolt. When the assembly was complete, they prepared for the final test. Everything my job, her future, Leonard's pride hung on those seconds. Start it. Lena whispered. The Helios core roared to life. 10 seconds. Smooth. 30 seconds. Stable. 60 seconds. Perfect. At 80 seconds, the cursed moment everyone's breath caught. 85. 89. 90. 91. The lab erupted. Applause, shouts, laughter, engineers hugging each other, slumping in relief, wiping tears from their eyes. 6 weeks of failure undone by a girl who listened instead of calculated. And then Leonard approached us. He knelt down before my daughter. You fixed it, he said. Not mockingly reverently. Then he stood, faced everyone, and declared, I made a promise. $100 million to whoever solved this. She solved it. The money is hers. I almost fell. I told him he didn't have to honor it. It had been a cruel joke, but he shook his head. My word is my law, he said. And today I learned what humility costs. He then turned to me and said something that broke whatever was left of my composure. Your medical treatments. They're covered, completely, from this moment on. I cried then uncontrollably because he had no idea how close I had been to giving up under the weight of bills and illness. Lena hugged me tight and whispered, now you can get better. Later, in his office, Leonard revealed a story that felt like fate itself. Lena's great-grandfather Joel Dawson had once saved Leonard's own grandfather during World War II by repairing a bomber engine mid-flight. Their lives were tied together long before this moment, through courage and quiet skill. Your great-grandfather saved my family, Leonard said softly. And today, you saved mine. 6 months later, everything had changed. I was no longer a cleaner, but the head of a new division, the Joel Dawson Center for Intuitive Mechanics, dedicated to people who understood machines by instinct, not textbooks. Lena visited after school, solving problems that left seasoned engineers speechless. And Leonard, he became a different man entirely. One afternoon, I found Lena sitting beside the Helios core, listening to its gentle thrum. What do you hear? Leonard asked her. She smiled. It's happy now. It's doing what it was born to do. And as I watched them, an old wound healed, a new future unfolding, I realized that engines aren't the only things that break and mend. Sometimes people do to. And sometimes all it takes to fix them is someone who knows how to listen. And as I watched them, an old wound healed, a new future unfolding, I realized that engines aren't the only things that break and mend. Sometimes people do to. And sometimes all it takes to fix them is someone who knows how to listen. In the months that followed, I often found myself wandering through the lab long after everyone else had left. The Helios core sat in the center of the room, humming steadily like a living thing at peace. I'd sit on a bench nearby, letting the soft vibration settle into my bones. It reminded me of standing in my grandfather's workshop as a child, surrounded by the gentle chorus of machines he tended like old friends. Back then, I never imagined that his quiet lessons would travel forward through generations, landing in Lena's hands like a gift waiting for its moment. Sometimes the engineers would stop me in the hallway just to say hello. Still a little shy, still a little amazed, they treated Lena not like a lucky child but like a colleague, one whose strange, intuitive talent had reshaped the way they approached their own work. Dr. Hart once told me she had submitted an internal report describing Lena's mechanical empathy, a phrase I'd never heard before but immediately understood. Machines, like people, seemed to open themselves to her. One evening, as we were preparing to head home, Lena tugged on my sleeve and pointed at the Helios core. It knows we're leaving, she whispered. I laughed softly, but something in her tone made me pause. She wasn't talking about the engine as a metaphor. She truly felt its presence, the same way my grandfather once did. And in that moment, watching her grin at the towering machine like it was an old friend, I understood something simple and profound. She wasn't just gifted. She was continuing a legacy, one built on patience, intuition, and a love for the quiet stories metal could tell. And for the first time in a long time, I felt unafraid of the future. Because I knew Lena would carry that legacy farther than any of us could imagine.